Sarah Martinez watched her father clean his rifle for the 100th time that month. The old soldier sat on their back porch every evening, his weathered hands moving with the same precision that had made him legendary during his 20-year military career. At 12 years old, she didn't understand why her father spent so much time with that weapon, but she knew it meant something important to him. "Papa, why do you always clean that gun?" she asked one evening, settling beside him on the wooden steps. Carlos Martinez looked at his daughter with tired eyes that had seen too much war. "This rifle saved my life more times than I can count, mija. When you depend on something for survival, you treat it with respect." Sarah nodded, though she didn't really understand. Their small house in rural Texas seemed a million miles away from any danger. Her father had retired from the army 3 years ago, and now he worked at the local hardware store. The neighbors knew him as a quiet man who kept to himself, but Sarah sometimes caught glimpses of someone else entirely, someone alert and watchful, someone who noticed everything. "Tell me about the war again," she said, even though she'd heard the stories many times before. Carlos set down his cleaning cloth and looked out across their property. "War isn't something you tell stories about for fun, Sarah, but there are lessons in everything, even the hard things." He had served as a sniper in Afghanistan, though he rarely talked about the details. What Sarah knew came in small pieces, late-night conversations when her mother was asleep, or moments like this when her father seemed lost in memories. She knew he had been good at his job, maybe the best in his unit. She knew he had saved lives by taking others. She knew it still haunted him. "The most important thing I learned," Carlos continued, "is that patience and preparation can mean the difference between life and death, not just in war, but in everything." Sarah picked up one of the bullets from the small box beside her father. It was heavier than she expected, cold and smooth in her small hand. "Could you teach me to shoot?" Carlos was quiet for a long moment. He had always known this day would come. Living in rural Texas, most kids learned to handle firearms for hunting or protection, but this felt different. There was something in Sarah's eyes, a focus and intensity that reminded him of himself at that age. "Your mother won't like it," he said finally. "Mama doesn't have to know everything right away," Sarah replied with a sly smile that made Carlos chuckle despite himself. The next Saturday morning, while Maria Martinez was at her sister's house, Carlos took Sarah to the old quarry on the edge of their property. He started with the basics: safety, respect for the weapon, understanding what a gun could do. Sarah listened with the kind of attention most kids reserved for their favorite TV shows. "Never point a gun at anything you don't intend to destroy," Carlos said, showing her how to hold the small .22 rifle he'd brought. "Every bullet has a destination. You are responsible for choosing that destination." Sarah's first shot went wide, hitting nothing but dirt. Her second shot wasn't much better, but Carlos saw something in the way she adjusted her stance, how she breathed before pulling the trigger, how she studied where her shots had gone. She wasn't just shooting randomly, she was learning. By the end of that first session, Sarah had managed to hit the paper target 3 times out of 20 shots. Not impressive by most standards, but Carlos recognized natural ability when he saw it. More importantly, he saw discipline. Sarah never got frustrated, never rushed her shots, never stopped paying attention to his instructions. "Can we come back next week?" she asked as they walked home. "We'll see," Carlos replied, but he was already planning their next lesson, over. The following months, their Saturday morning sessions became routine. Maria eventually found out, of course, but Carlos convinced her it was important for Sarah to learn gun safety. "She's going to encounter firearms living out here," he argued. "Better she knows how to handle them properly." Sarah progressed faster than Carlos had expected. Her aim improved steadily, but more than that, she developed the mindset of a shooter. She learned to read wind, to account for distance, to control her breathing and heart rate. She began to understand that shooting wasn't just about pulling a trigger. It was about observation, calculation, and perfect timing. "You have good eyes," Carlos told her one morning, after she'd managed to hit a target at 200 yards with the .22. "And you think before you act. Those are gifts, mija, but gifts that come with responsibility." Sarah was 14 now, taller and more serious than most girls her age. She excelled in school, particularly in mathematics and science. But her real passion was these morning sessions with her father. She had moved up to a larger rifle, and Carlos had begun teaching her about different types of ammunition, weather conditions, and the physics of long-distance shooting. "Why did you stop?" she asked one day. They had been practicing for over 2 years, and Sarah was consistently hitting targets at 300 yards. "Why did you leave the army?" Carlos was quiet for a long time, watching his daughter clean her rifle with the same care he had taught her. "Because I realized that all the skill in the world doesn't matter if you lose sight of why you're fighting," he said finally. "I was good at my job, maybe too good, but I started to forget that every target was someone's son or father or brother." Sarah looked up from her cleaning. "Do you regret it? What you did?" "I regret some things," Carlos admitted, "but I don't regret protecting my fellow soldiers. I don't regret coming home to you and your mother, and I don't regret teaching you these skills because I know you'll use them for the right reasons." As Sarah entered her junior year of high school, she had become something remarkable, a young woman with skills that would have impressed seasoned military snipers, but more importantly, someone with the wisdom to understand the weight of those skills. Carlos had taught her that being able to take a life from a distance wasn't just about technical ability. It was about having the judgment to know when such action was necessary and the character to live with the consequences. Neither of them could have imagined how soon those lessons would be tested, or how the quiet skills learned in their small Texas town would one day make Sarah Martinez a name whispered with fear by enemies who had never even seen her face. Sarah Martinez stood at attention in the crisp morning air of Fort Benning, Georgia. At 19, she had the lean build and sharp eyes of someone who had spent years learning precision. The other recruits in her basic training company saw a quiet girl from Texas who kept to herself. They had no idea they were looking at someone who could put 5 bullets through a quarter-sized target at 500 yards. The decision to join the army hadn't been easy. Carlos had mixed feelings about his daughter following in his footsteps, but he understood her drive. "The world needs people who can protect others," he had told her the night before she left for boot camp. "Just remember everything I taught you about knowing when to shoot and when not to." Basic training was challenging for most recruits, but Sarah found it almost easy compared to the discipline her father had instilled in her. While other soldiers struggled with early morning wake-ups and physical demands, Sarah had been rising before dawn for years. While they fumbled with their weapons during firearms training, Sarah's muscle memory kicked in from countless hours of practice. Drill Sergeant Morrison noticed her during the first week of marksmanship training. While most recruits were happy to hit the paper target at 100 yards, Sarah was grouping her shots in patterns smaller than a silver dollar. After the session, Morrison approached her. "Martinez, where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My father taught me, Drill Sergeant." "Your father military?" "Yes, Drill Sergeant. Army sniper, retired." Morrison nodded slowly. "I'm recommending you for advanced marksmanship testing. Think you can handle more than basic rifle work?" Sarah kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt a surge of excitement. "Yes, Drill Sergeant." The advanced testing took place 2 weeks later at a different range with targets at various distances up to 800 yards. Sarah found herself competing against soldiers who had been shooting competitively for years, many of whom had already expressed interest in sniper school. She was the only woman in the group and by far the youngest. The test began at dawn with moving targets at 300 yards. Sarah watched the other shooters, noting their breathing patterns and how they tracked their targets. When her turn came, she settled into position behind the rifle, feeling the familiar calm that had always accompanied her shooting. The wind was light but shifting. She adjusted her aim slightly and squeezed the trigger. 5 shots, 5 hits, all within the center ring. By the end of the day, Sarah had outshot everyone except a staff sergeant from Montana who had been competitive shooting since childhood. Even then, the difference was minimal. More importantly, she had impressed the instructors with her consistency and composure under pressure. "Martinez," called Captain Williams, the officer overseeing the testing. "You interested in sniper school?" "Yes, sir. It's not easy." Most people who attempt it don't make it through. It's 3 months of the most challenging training the Army offers. Sarah thought of her father, of all those Saturday mornings at the quarry, of the lessons about patience and precision and responsibility. "I'm ready, sir." 3 months later, Sarah found herself at Fort Moore for the Army Sniper Course. The program was legendary for its difficulty, physically, mentally, and emotionally demanding. Of the 30 soldiers who began the course, only 12 would graduate. The first week nearly broke her. Not the shooting, which remained her strength, but the mental challenges. Hours of observation exercises, memorizing complex details, estimating ranges without instruments. The instructors pushed every student to their limits, looking for those who would crack under pressure. Sarah's roommate, a tough soldier from Detroit named Jessica Chen, washed out during the second week after struggling with long-distance calculations. "I don't know how you do it," Jessica said the night before she left. "You never seem stressed about any of this." "My father always said that pressure is just another environmental factor to account for," Sarah replied. "Like wind or temperature." The stalking exercises were what separated the survivors from the rest. Students had to move undetected across open ground to shooting positions while instructors with binoculars searched for any sign of movement. Sarah excelled at this, drawing on patience lessons learned during countless hours of waiting for the perfect shot while hunting with her father. During one exercise, she spent 8 hours moving 400 yards across a field in broad daylight. Every movement was calculated, every pause planned. When she finally reached her shooting position and took her shots, both bullets found their marks at 600 yards. The instructors, who had been watching the entire time, admitted they had lost sight of her for hours at a time. "How do you do that?" asked Private Williams, one of her remaining classmates. "It's like you disappear." "My dad taught me that the best camouflage is patience," Sarah explained. "Most people move too much. They get impatient. If you're willing to wait, really wait, you become invisible." The final test came during week 12. Each remaining student had to complete a complex mission simulation, infiltrate to a designated position, observe and report on enemy activity for 48 hours, then eliminate a high-value target with a single shot at maximum range, all while avoiding detection by opposing forces actively searching for them. Sarah chose a position 900 yards from the target building, farther than most students would attempt but within her capabilities. She spent the first day creating a hide so well concealed that a search team walked within 5 feet of her position, without detection. For 2 days and nights, she observed and reported, noting patterns in guard changes, and identifying the mock enemy commander. When the time came for the shot, Sarah felt the familiar calm settle over her. Wind was gusting from the southwest at approximately 8 miles per hour. Temperature was 72 degrees. Target was 9-12 yards away by her range estimation. She adjusted her scope accordingly and controlled her breathing. The shot was perfect, striking the target mannequin center mass. Mission accomplished with 0 detection. Sarah graduated second in her class out of 12 survivors. More importantly, she had earned the respect of instructors who had trained some of the Army's most elite snipers. Her official designation was now 11B, with additional skill identifier B4, Sniper. "Congratulations, Specialist Martinez," said Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the chief instructor, as he handed her the graduation certificate. "Your father would be proud." "Thank you, Master Sergeant. You've got natural ability. But more than that, you've got the right mindset. That combination is rare. Use it wisely." 3 weeks later, Sarah received her first assignment, the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Liberty, North Carolina. She would be attached to a reconnaissance platoon as their designated marksman, providing overwatch and precision fire support. She packed her gear for the move. Sarah called her father. "I made it through sniper school, Papa." Carlos was quiet for a moment on the other end of the line. "I never doubted you would, mija. Just remember, the hardest lessons come after school. Stay smart, stay safe, and never forget why you're carrying that rifle." Sarah looked at her new sniper rifle, a precision instrument that represented years of training and preparation. "I won't forget." What neither of them knew was that world events were already in motion that would test everything Sarah had learned, in ways her training had never anticipated. Her skills would soon be needed not in conventional warfare, but in a shadow conflict where the enemy was hidden and the stakes were higher than anyone imagined. The helicopter touched down in the dusty compound just outside Kandahar, Afghanistan, as Sarah Martinez stepped onto foreign soil for the first time. The desert heat hit her immediately, even in the early morning hours. At 21, she was now a sergeant and had spent 2 years with the 82nd Airborne, but this deployment would be different from anything she had experienced. Captain Bradley Thompson, her new commanding officer, met her at the landing zone. "Sergeant Martinez, welcome to FOB Chapman. Hope you're ready to put that sniper training to work." "Yes, sir, ready for duty." "Good, because we've got a situation brewing. Intel suggests there's a high-value target operating in this region, someone who's been coordinating attacks against coalition forces. Your job is going to be finding him." Sarah was assigned to a special operations unit tasked with tracking down Khalil Nazari, a Taliban commander who had earned the nickname The Ghost for his ability to strike coalition forces and disappear without a trace. For 3 months, he had been responsible for IED attacks that had killed dozens of soldiers and civilians. The intelligence briefing painted a picture of a clever and ruthless enemy. Nazari never stayed in one location for more than a day, used different routes constantly, and had an extensive network of local supporters. Previous attempts to capture or eliminate him had failed because he seemed to anticipate every move the coalition forces made. "He's careful," explained Lieutenant Morrison, the intelligence officer. "Never uses phones or radios, changes his appearance regularly, and trusts very few people. But he has one weakness. He visits his sick mother in a village about 20 kilometers north of here. Not regularly, but Intel believes he shows up every few weeks." Sarah studied the maps and photographs of the village. It was small, maybe 50 buildings scattered across a valley with good overwatch positions on the surrounding hills. "How reliable is this intelligence?" "Solid sources. The problem is we don't know when he'll show up, and we can't maintain a constant presence in the area without tipping him off. He's got people watching for unusual activity." Sarah nodded, understanding the challenge. "I need to do reconnaissance of the area, identify possible shooting positions, and study the patterns of normal life in that village." Over the next week, Sarah made 3 separate reconnaissance trips to the area around the village, each time approaching from a different direction and using different cover stories. She posed as a member of a medical team, then as part of a water well inspection crew, and finally as security for a supply convoy that took a route near the village. What she observed troubled her. The village appeared normal during the day: children playing, women carrying water, men working in small gardens. But there were subtle signs that suggested the residents were watching for outsiders. Too many people seemed to notice her team's presence, and conversations stopped when soldiers came too close. "He's got early warning systems in place," and Sarah reported to Captain Thompson. "Multiple layers. Anyone approaching that village is going to be spotted long before they get close enough to be effective." "What do you recommend?" Sarah spread out a topographical map of the region. "There's a ridgeline here about 1,200 yards southeast of the village. Good concealment, multiple escape routes, and a clear view of the main routes in and out. If I position myself there, I can observe without being detected." 1,200 yards is a long shot, Sergeant." "It's within my capabilities, sir. But, more importantly, it's outside their security perimeter. They're watching for threats at close range, not extreme long distance." Captain Thompson studied the map. "How long could you maintain observation from that position?" "As long as necessary. Sir, I can establish a hide that would be undetectable from ground level, and I've got enough supplies to stay out there for a week at a time." 3 days later, Sarah began what would become a legendary vigil. She moved into position during pre-dawn, darkness, carrying minimal gear and enough food and water for 5 days. The hide she constructed was a masterpiece of camouflage, a shallow depression in the rocky ground, covered with local vegetation and positioned to blend perfectly with the natural landscape. For 6 days, she watched the village through her scope, noting patterns of daily life, memorizing faces, tracking the movements of anyone who appeared to be acting as lookouts. She saw children going to a small school, women gathering water from the village well, men driving battered pickup, trucks loaded with produce to and from nearby markets. On the seventh day, she spotted something different. A man arrived at the village just after sunrise, driving a motorcycle that he parked behind one of the larger buildings. He was dressed like any other local resident, but something about his movements caught Sarah's attention. He walked differently, more alertly, scanning his surroundings in a way that suggested military training. Through her scope, Sarah studied the man's face and compared it to the photographs she had memorized. The beard was different and he appeared to have gained weight, but the eyes were unmistakable. Khalil Nazari had finally appeared. Sarah keyed her radio with a short, coded transmission that would alert her backup team without broadcasting her position. Then she settled in to wait. Her father's lessons about patience had never been more relevant. For 3 hours, Sarah watched as Nazari moved through the village. He visited several houses, including one that intelligence had identified as possibly belonging to his mother. Each stop was brief and he constantly checked his surroundings. Even in his home area, among people he trusted, the man remained cautious. Around noon, Nazari emerged from his mother's house and began walking toward where his motorcycle was parked. Sarah realized this might be her only opportunity. Once he left the village, he would disappear again, possibly for months. The distance was 1,247 yards by her calculation. Wind was light but variable, shifting between 3 and 7 miles per hour from the northwest. Temperature was approximately 85 degrees. Nazari was moving at a steady walking pace toward his motorcycle. Sarah made her calculations and adjusted her scope. She controlled her breathing and waited for the moment when all variables would align. As Nazari reached his motorcycle and began to swing his leg over it, Sarah squeezed the trigger. The bullet took 1.6 seconds to reach its target. Khalil Nazari, the Taliban commander known as the Ghost, collapsed beside his motorcycle and never moved again. The shot had been perfect, a kill shot from over 3/4 of a mile away. Sarah immediately began her extraction procedure, collapsing her hide and moving to a secondary position 400 yards away. Within minutes, she could see people running toward Nazari's position. But by then she was already making her way to the extraction point where Captain Thompson's team was waiting. "Confirmed kill," she reported over the radio as she reached the extraction point. "Target eliminated." The mission was over, but its impact would be felt for months. Nazari's death disrupted the Taliban's operations in the region and saved countless lives. More importantly for Sarah, it established her reputation as one of the most skilled snipers in the theater of operations. Word of the 1,247-yard kill shot spread through the military community faster than official reports could travel. Sarah Martinez, the quiet girl from rural Texas, had announced herself as a sniper of exceptional ability. But she had also made herself a target. Enemy forces began actively searching for the coalition sniper, who could kill their leaders from impossible distances. As Sarah cleaned her rifle that night back at the base, she thought about her father's words about every bullet having a destination. Today's bullet had found exactly the right destination, but she knew it was just the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous game. 6 months after eliminating Khalil Nazari, Sarah Martinez had become a legend in the special operations community. Her success rate was unprecedented, 12 confirmed kills, all at distances exceeding 800 yards, with 0 civilian casualties. But with fame came danger, and enemy forces had begun to adapt their tactics specifically to counter her abilities. The briefing room at FOB Chapman buzzed with tension as Captain Thompson outlined their newest intelligence. "We've intercepted communications suggesting the Taliban has brought in a specialist to deal with our sniper problem," he said, looking directly at Sarah. "Someone they're calling the Hunter." Sarah studied the grainy photographs on the briefing board. The man appeared to be in his 40s, lean and weathered, with the patient eyes of someone accustomed to waiting. Intelligence suggested he was a former Soviet sniper who had fought in Chechnya and later worked as a mercenary in various conflict zones. "His name is Viktor Petrov," continued Lieutenant Morrison. "Russian Special Forces background credited with over 60 confirmed kills. during the Chechen conflict. Since then, he's worked for whoever pays him best. Apparently, someone is paying him very well to eliminate you specifically, Sergeant Martinez. What do we know about his methods? Sarah asked. He's patient, professional, and extremely dangerous. Unlike local fighters, he understands counter-sniper tactics. He'll study your patterns, your preferred shooting positions, and your extraction routes. Then he'll set a trap. Sarah nodded, feeling a chill despite the desert heat. For the first time since arriving in Afghanistan, she was facing someone with skills comparable to her own. Someone who understood the sniper's mindset because he shared it. Recommendation is to pull you back from field operations until we can neutralize this threat, Captain Thompson said. No, sir. Sarah's response was immediate and firm. If I stop operating, he wins without firing a shot. Our missions continue, to save lives. I just need to adjust my tactics. Sergeant, this isn't a game. This man has killed experienced snipers before. With respect, sir, so have I. The psychological warfare began immediately. 2 days after the briefing, Sarah's spotter found a message carved into a tree near one of her previous shooting positions. I know where you shoot from, American girl. Soon I will know where you sleep. Sarah examined the carving, noting the precision of the knifework and the confidence it represented. Petrov wasn't just hunting her. He was playing mind games, trying to make her doubt herself and change her routines out of fear. Instead, Sarah decided to send her own message. During her next mission, eliminating a Taliban weapons coordinator, at 950 yards, she left behind a small American flag tied to a branch near her shooting position. The message was clear. She wasn't hiding and she wasn't afraid. The cat-and-mouse game intensified over the following weeks. Sarah began varying her tactics more dramatically, sometimes using positions that seemed tactically inferior but offered unexpected advantages. She changed her shooting schedule, her approach routes, and even the caliber of ammunition she used, making it harder for Petrov to predict her methods. The breakthrough came during a mission to eliminate a bomb maker who had been supplying IEDs to multiple Taliban cells. Sarah had established herself in what appeared to be a standard overwatch position on a ridge overlooking the target compound. But instead of taking the shot from that position, she had set up her actual shooting position 200 yards away, using the obvious position as bait. Through her scope, Sarah watched her decoy position for 3 hours before she saw him. A slight movement in rocks that should have been still. The brief glint of sunlight off glass that might have been an optical sight. Viktor Petrov had found what he thought was her shooting position and was preparing to eliminate her. Sarah faced a choice that would define her career and possibly save countless future lives. She could take a defensive shot, trying to wound or drive off the Russian sniper, or she could wait for the perfect opportunity to end the threat permanently. She chose patience just as her father had taught her years ago in the quarry behind their Texas home. For 2 more hours, Sarah waited and watched. Petrov was disciplined and careful, moving only when absolutely necessary and always keeping most of his body concealed behind cover. But he was focused on the wrong position, and eventually his patience began to wear thin. The shot opportunity came when Petrov shifted position to get a better angle on what he believed was Sarah's hide. For just a moment, his profile was exposed as he moved between rocks. The distance was 437 yards, not Sarah's longest shot, but one that required perfect timing and accuracy. Sarah controlled her breathing and squeezed the trigger. Viktor Petrov, the hunter who had come to Afghanistan to eliminate her, fell forward onto the rocks where he had been positioning himself for what he thought would be a killing shot. The psychological impact of Petrov's death was immediate and profound. Taliban communications intercepted over the following weeks revealed confusion and concern. Their most dangerous sniper hunter had been eliminated by the very target he had been sent to kill. More importantly, Sarah's reputation evolved from respected sniper to something approaching mythical status among enemy forces. Local Taliban commanders began refusing missions in areas where Sarah might be operating. Supply convoys changed routes to avoid regions where she had previously been active. The psychological effect of one sniper was disrupting enemy operations across an entire province. But Sarah understood that this success came with increased responsibility. Enemy forces would continue to adapt and new threats would emerge. She couldn't allow her success to make her overconfident or careless. During a secure video call with her father that evening, Sarah described the encounter with Petrov without revealing specific operational details. "You did what you had to do, Mija," Carlos said. "But remember what I taught you about victories. They can be more dangerous than defeats if they make you stop learning." "I remember, Papa. Every engagement teaches me something new." "Good. And remember that the enemy learns too. They'll keep sending people after you, each one more dangerous than the last." Sarah nodded, understanding the truth in her father's words. She had eliminated one hunter, but there would be others. Her success in Afghanistan was making her a high-value target, not just for local Taliban forces, but for anyone who wanted to prove themselves against America's most effective sniper. As she cleaned her rifle that night, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed since those first lessons at the quarry. She was no longer just a sniper. She had become a symbol, both to her own forces and to the enemy. That symbol would save lives and complete missions that others couldn't attempt, but it would also paint an increasingly large target on her back. The war in Afghanistan was teaching Sarah lessons her father's training couldn't have prepared her for. But those foundational lessons about patience, precision, and responsibility remained the core of everything she did. Soon, she would need those lessons more than ever, as her reputation spread beyond Afghanistan and into conflicts she never could have imagined. 3 years after eliminating Viktor Petrov, Sergeant First Class Sarah Martinez found herself in a very different kind of war. The official deployment to Syria was listed as advisory support, but the reality was far more complex. ISIS had taken control of vast territories, and their brutality had shocked the world. Sarah's unit was part of a classified operation to eliminate high-value targets who were coordinating terror attacks across multiple continents. The briefing room in the Covert Operations Center looked nothing like military facilities Sarah had known. Located in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of a city she couldn't name, it housed one of the most sensitive counterterrorism operations in U.S. history. The walls were covered with photographs, maps, and connection charts showing the complex network of ISIS leadership. Martinez called Colonel James Harrison, the operation commander. "You're our primary asset for this mission. The target is Hassan al-Bakr, ISIS military commander for the entire northern region." Sarah studied the intelligence packet. Al-Bakr was responsible for training camps that had produced terrorists who carried out attacks in Paris, London, and Brussels. He was also planning something bigger. Intelligence suggested a coordinated attack involving multiple European cities that could kill thousands of civilians. "Location?" Sarah asked. "That's the problem. He moves constantly, uses body doubles, and has survived 4 previous assassination attempts. But we've identified a pattern. Every few months he visits a specific mosque in Raqqa for Friday prayers. It's the only predictable behavior we've documented." Sarah examined the satellite images of the mosque and surrounding area. The building was in the heart of ISIS-controlled territory, surrounded by residential neighborhoods filled with civilians. Any conventional military attack would result in massive civilian casualties. Distance from viable shooting positions? Minimum 800 yards from any position that offers adequate concealment and escape routes. Most practical positions are 1,000 yards or more. Sarah nodded. Long-distance shots were her specialty, but this presented unique challenges. The target would be surrounded by innocent civilians, the shooting position would be deep in enemy territory, and extraction would be extremely difficult. Timeline? Al-Bakr is expected to appear for Friday prayers 3 days from now. You'll have 1 shot, Sergeant. Miss, and he disappears again, probably for months. Succeed, and you save thousands of lives. The infiltration required Sarah to pose as a refugee fleeing the war-torn region. Traveling with a small team of special operations soldiers disguised as her family, she crossed into Syria through a route controlled by Kurdish forces allied with the United States. The journey to Raqqa took 18 hours of careful movement through territory controlled by various factions. Sarah's team had to navigate checkpoints, avoid ISIS patrols, and maintain their cover identities while carrying specialized equipment hidden in seemingly innocent refugee belongings. 2 days before the planned mission, Sarah established her shooting position on the roof of an abandoned building 1,150 yards from the mosque. The hide required her to remain motionless for extended periods while ISIS patrols moved through the streets below. Any suspicious activity would bring immediate and deadly attention. Through her scope, Sarah studied the mosque and surrounding buildings. She identified the most likely routes al-Bakr would use to approach the building, the position where he would be most vulnerable, and the narrow window of time when she would have a clear shot without risking civilian casualties. Friday morning arrived with clear skies and light winds, ideal shooting conditions. Sarah had been in position since before dawn, watching through her scope as the faithful began gathering for prayers. By mid-morning, hundreds of people were moving toward the mosque, including women and children who would be in the general area when al-Bakr arrived. At 11:47 a.m., Sarah spotted the target convoy approaching the mosque. 3 identical black SUVs, exactly matching the intelligence reports. Standard procedure for high-value targets like al-Bakr. Use multiple vehicles and decoys to confuse potential attackers. Through her scope, Sarah watched as the vehicles stopped near the mosque entrance. Men emerged from all 3 SUVs, some of them obvious bodyguards, others who might be al-Bakr himself. She had studied photographs and video footage for months, memorizing every detail of the target's appearance, but the distance and multiple possible candidates made identification challenging. Then she saw him. The man emerging from the middle vehicle moved differently than the others, more confidently, with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. When he turned toward the mosque entrance, Sarah could see his profile clearly through her scope. Hassan al-Bakr, the butcher of Raqqa, was 1,150 yards away and completely unaware that he was being watched. Sarah began her shooting sequence, the same mental checklist her father had taught her years ago in rural Texas: wind speed and direction. Light and variable, approximately 4 miles per hour from the southeast. Temperature 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Target distance 1,150 yards confirmed. Target movement, walking at a steady pace toward the mosque entrance. The shot window would be narrow. Al-Bakr would be exposed for perhaps 10 seconds as he walked from his vehicle to the mosque entrance. After that, he would be inside the building, surrounded by innocent worshippers, making any shot impossible. Sarah controlled her breathing and made her final calculations. The bullet would take approximately 1.3 seconds to reach the target. She had to anticipate al-Bakr's movement and aim for where he would be, not where he was when she pulled the trigger. As al-Bakr reached the midpoint between his vehicle and the mosque entrance, Sarah squeezed the trigger. The shot was perfect. Hassan al-Bakr, one of ISIS's most dangerous commanders, collapsed on the steps of the mosque before he could reach the entrance. Chaos erupted in the streets below as bodyguards scrambled to understand what had happened. Sarah immediately began her extraction procedure, moving quickly but carefully from her shooting position to a predetermined escape route. Within minutes, ISIS forces would flood the area searching for the sniper who had eliminated their commander. The extraction was harrowing. Sarah's team had to navigate through streets filled with angry ISIS fighters while maintaining their refugee cover identities. Twice they were stopped at impromptu checkpoints, but their documentation and cover stories held up under scrutiny. 18 hours later, Sarah was debriefing in a secure facility in Turkey. The elimination of Hassan al-Bakr had disrupted ISIS operations across multiple theaters and prevented the coordinated attacks that intelligence suggested would have killed thousands of civilians in European cities. "Outstanding work, Sergeant Martinez," Colonel Harrison said during the debriefing. "That shot saved more lives than we may ever know." But Sarah's success in Syria came with unexpected consequences. Within weeks, her encrypted communications were intercepted by hostile intelligence services. Her real identity, previously known only to a small circle of military personnel, had been compromised. Enemy forces now knew the name and background of America's most effective sniper. The intelligence briefing 3 weeks later was sobering. "Martinez, your identity has been leaked to several hostile organizations," Colonel Harrison explained. "ISIS, Taliban remnants, and various other terror groups have put bounties on your head. We're talking about millions of dollars for anyone who can eliminate you. Sarah absorbed this information with the same calm she brought to every mission. What's the recommendation, sir? Officially, we're pulling you from field operations and assigning you to training duties. Your operational career is over. And unofficially? Colonel Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Unofficially, there are situations where your specific skills are the only option available, but any future missions would be completely deniable. If something goes wrong, you're on your own. Sarah thought about her father's lessons about responsibility and consequences. Every shot had a destination, but every shot also had implications that rippled far beyond the immediate target. Her success had made her a symbol of American military effectiveness, but it had also made her a prime target for every terrorist organization in the world. I understand the risks, sir. I'm willing to continue serving where needed. That night, Sarah called her father for the first time in months. Due to operational security concerns, their conversations had been limited, but now she needed his guidance more than ever. Papa, my identity has been compromised. The enemy knows who I am now. Carlos was silent for a long moment. How do you feel about that, mija? Scared, but also determined. There are still missions that need to be completed, lives that need to be saved. Remember what I taught you about being a target, Carlos said. When everyone is hunting you, you have two choices. Hide or become such a dangerous target that hunting you becomes more costly than leaving you alone. Sarah understood. Her operational career wasn't over. It was entering a new and more dangerous phase. She would continue to take on missions that others couldn't complete, but now she would be doing so while being actively hunted by some of the most dangerous people in the world. 6 months after her identity was compromised, Master Sergeant Sarah Martinez received the most dangerous assignment of her career. The target was Dmitry Volkov, a Russian arms dealer who had been supplying advanced weapons to terrorist organizations worldwide. But this wasn't just another elimination mission. Volkov had specifically requested a meeting with the American sniper who had been disrupting his client's operations. It's obviously a trap, Colonel Harrison said during the classified briefing in an underground facility outside Washington, D.C. Volkov knows exactly who you are, and he's betting that he can eliminate you in a controlled environment of his choosing. Sarah studied the intelligence reports on Volkov. The Russian was more than just an arms dealer. He was a former Spetsnaz operative with extensive combat experience and connections to intelligence services across Eastern Europe. He had survived 3 previous assassination attempts and had eliminated several Western operatives who had gotten too close to his operations. What's he offering in exchange for this meeting? Sarah asked. Information about a planned terrorist attack on American soil, something he claims will make 9/11 look small by comparison. The intelligence community believes he's telling the truth about the threat, but using it as bait to draw you into a trap. Location for the meeting? An abandoned industrial complex outside Prague. Volkov's choice, obviously. Multiple buildings, countless hiding spots, and his own security team controlling the perimeter. Tactically, it's a nightmare scenario. Sarah examined the satellite imagery of the complex. Multiple factory buildings, warehouses, and administrative structures spread across several acres. Dozens of potential shooting positions, but also dozens of places where enemy snipers could be positioned to eliminate her. Timeline: 72 hours. After that, Volkov disappears and we lose our only lead on this terrorist plot. Sarah understood the impossible situation. If she declined the mission, thousands of American civilians might die in a terrorist attack. If she accepted, she would be walking into a carefully planned ambush designed specifically to kill her. But there was a third option that her father's training had prepared her for: turn the trap into an opportunity. I'll take the mission, sir, but I want complete tactical control over our approach and backup plan. Martinez, this is suicide. Volkov has had months to prepare this trap. Maybe, or maybe he's so focused on killing me that he's forgotten I might have plans of my own. The flight to Prague was conducted under deep cover, with Sarah traveling on forged documents as a Czech businesswoman returning from the United States. Her equipment had been smuggled into the country through diplomatic channels and was waiting at a safe house operated by CIA assets. Sarah spent 2 days conducting reconnaissance of the industrial complex from multiple angles. Using different vehicles and cover identities, she mapped out Volkov's security arrangements, identified his sniper positions, and located the most likely spots for the meeting itself. What she discovered confirmed her suspicions. Volkov had, indeed, prepared an elaborate trap. At least 6 sniper positions were manned around the complex, all with overlapping fields of fire covering the central building where the meeting was scheduled to take place. But Volkov's confidence in his plan might be his weakness. The night before the meeting, Sarah implemented a strategy her father had taught her during their early training sessions. Sometimes the best way to avoid a trap is to spring it on your own terms. Instead of approaching the complex during the scheduled meeting time, Sarah infiltrated the area at 3 a.m., moving through the perimeter like a ghost and eliminating Volkov's sentries one by one using silent methods, her special operations training had perfected. By dawn, she had neutralized the entire outer security ring without raising any alarms. Sarah then positioned herself in the one location Volkov hadn't anticipated, inside the building where the meeting was supposed to take place. When Volkov arrived with his remaining security team expecting to ambush her, Sarah was already in position behind him. "Mr. Volkov," Sarah called out from the shadows of the industrial building. "I believe you wanted to meet with me." The Russian arms dealer spun around, his hand moving toward the pistol under his jacket. But Sarah's voice stopped him cold. "I wouldn't recommend that. My rifle is trained on you from a position you can't see, and my finger is already on the trigger." Volkov slowly raised his hands, a bitter smile spreading across his face. "The legendary American sniper. I had hoped to test my skills against yours, but it seems you have already won this contest. Tell me about the terrorist attack you mentioned." "Ah, yes, my insurance policy. 3 nuclear devices, stolen from Pakistani military facilities, currently being transported to major American cities. The attacks are scheduled for next week." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "Locations? New York, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. The devices are small but effective. Each one will kill approximately 100,000 people immediately, with radiation effects claiming many more over time." "Who's behind it?" "A consortium of terrorist organizations funded by certain state actors who prefer to remain anonymous. I was simply the middleman who provided the transport containers and security arrangements." Sarah realized she was facing a choice that would define not just her career, but potentially the fate of hundreds of thousands of innocent people. She could eliminate Volkov immediately, but then the information about stopping the attacks might die with him. Or she could risk trusting him to provide accurate intelligence that could save countless lives. "How do I stop the attacks?" Volkov seemed genuinely surprised by the question. "You would trust the word of someone who lured you into a trap? My father taught me that even enemies can be useful if their interests align with yours. Right now you're a dead man whether I kill you or your terrorist clients discover you've been captured. But if you help stop these attacks, there might be a way for you to disappear permanently." For the first time, Volkov looked uncertain. "You would allow me to escape in exchange for this information?" "I would allow you to try. Whether you succeed depends on how good your information is and how quickly my government can act on it." Volkov provided detailed information about the nuclear devices, their transport routes, and the terrorist cells responsible for the attacks. Sarah transmitted this intelligence to Colonel Harrison while keeping Volkov under guard in the abandoned building. The response was immediate and massive. Every available resource of the American intelligence community was mobilized to intercept the nuclear devices before they could reach their targets. Within 18 hours, all 3 devices had been located and secured. The terrorist cells responsible were either captured or eliminated. Volkov kept his end of the bargain, providing additional intelligence about other terrorist operations in exchange for the opportunity to disappear into the shadowy world of international criminals. Sarah never saw him again, but intelligence reports suggested he had retired from the arms-dealing business and was living quietly somewhere in South America. The mission's success was never publicly acknowledged, but within the intelligence community, Sarah Martinez had achieved legendary status. She had single-handedly prevented what could have been the deadliest terrorist attack in American history. More importantly, she had proven that her father's lessons about judgment, patience, and moral courage could guide her through the most impossible situations. The quiet girl from rural Texas had become something unprecedented. A sniper whose reputation alone was enough to deter enemies, and whose skills were considered a strategic national asset. As Sarah returned to the United States, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from her father's backyard to the world's most dangerous battlefields. Every lesson learned in that Texas quarry had contributed to saving hundreds of thousands of lives, proving that the values Carlos Martinez had instilled in his daughter were more powerful than any weapon. The enemy's worst nightmare wasn't just Sarah's marksmanship or tactical skills. It was the combination of lethal ability with unwavering moral purpose that her father's lessons had created. In a world where technology and firepower seemed to matter most, Sarah Martinez had proven that character and wisdom were still the most important weapons of all.